All right, well, welcome. Today's topic is Enhancing Education with Technology from Thinking Collaboratively, Learning in a Community of Inquiry by D. Randy Garrison. I'm your facilitator, Leslie Marsh. Welcome to class. So first we'll run through a little quality check and make sure that your audio and video is all set up correctly. You can click the purple tab in the lower right-hand corner and select the little setting wheel, looks like a cog down there, and choose Set Up Camera and Microphone. Then just follow the directions to choose and test your microphone and your webcam. You'll have to probably, you may have to set it up again, but if you choose Keep Settings, that may allow you to just keep those settings for each time you log in. But sometimes BB Collaborate can be a little fussy. So then I also would like you to set up your BB Ultra panels so that you can see what's going on, who's in the class, and what the chat is going on so that you don't miss anything. And to do that, you will go down to the bottom there of that panel that you opened up and select the attendees panel. You'll expand that by clicking on the icon that looks like two little people. Just drag it to the left and drop the panel down to keep the attendee list expanded. And then to make sure that you're able to participate in the chat, just click on the icon that looks like a little speech bubble to open up that chat panel for the discussions. So I'm also going to make sure that I'm recording and make sure that you can see and hear everything. So can you please go down to the bottom center of your panel and raise up your hand if you can hear me? Great. Okay, and then you can just lower your hands again. Thank you. So let's focus. I've had the door closed myself, deep breaths, and I'm nervous anyway. Turn off your phone and get comfortable and just take a breath and imagine just standing on this beach. I think it would be really lovely to be there right now. And we'll get started. So the big idea that we're going to talk about is how to strategically integrate the technology that's out there today into your classrooms, whether they're online or otherwise, and kind of rethink the roles of educators and how that will improve student engagement and completion rates, and making sure that the technology that you're using isn't distracting, but is actually adding to the educational experience. The learning objectives are going to be to learn how technology has shaped distance education in recent years, and to recognize the detrimental effects of relying on technology too much in distance education, but also to recognize some of the successful uses of technology in blended and online education. And then we'll also experience some of the interactive use of online learning tools that you can use in your own classes. So I have a poll for you that I would like you to take here. And so the beginnings of distance education started when? So the first recorded instance of distance education was a private correspondence course on shorthand that was advertised in the Boston Gazette. So here's a poll. Would you please enter the one that you think is correct? And you think one more person? Great, okay. So actually the answer is 1728, believe it or not. And just what's your emoticon for that one? What would you put in the chat for that? That's pretty amazing to me. I was really amazed to learn that somebody had been doing courses then. So it was all online correspondence course, and that was the case in a lot of for many, many years. So over the almost 275 years since then, there has been a lot of technology that has come along and disrupted education and reshaped it. So along the way, when Alexander Graham Bell, for instance, invented, I think it was him who invented the phonograph, people actually received some of their lessons on phonograph records that were mailed to them. So it was still distance education that was mainly one way. The instructor just kind of gave the information to the student. It relied on a lot of student autonomy to take that lesson and make it their own and do things with it. So there wasn't a lot of interaction. And that continued on for quite a while until the turn of this past century, around the 2000s. So students, while you're watching this at a later time, please take some notes and follow the directions given for our activities. Sorry, I should have said that earlier. But at any time, feel free to add to the conversation using the chat box. So the disruptive technologies that came along were around the beginning of this past century, and those technologies allowed were because of growth in computing power, the internet, email, websites, and other online tools that allowed connection and sharing information that was freed by the constraints of time and distance. So that meant you didn't have to be there in class, you didn't have to be in front of somebody, and you didn't have to be there at the same time in order for this communication and collaboration to happen. There are lots of new tools out there, and a lot of them developed, as I said, around the turn of the last century. So here's when many of the really well-known ones these days, just a small selection of some of the well-known ones, actually came into being. The World Wide Web started around 1994 or so, and the first web browser the way that people could connect to the World Wide Web was through an interface called Mosaic. And I was actually in college then, and one of my instructors talked to us about that and said, this is the wave of the future. This is the way things are going to happen. And he was absolutely right. This does not include learning management systems because those are typically closed to the public, so I didn't add those guys in. So here we go. I have another little activity for you. Go on up to the text tool. Not the text tool, I'm sorry, the shapes tool, which is up at the top here, the top of your screen. And if you would choose your own color, and then here's the key over here on this side for the shape to use. And if you would answer this question by drawing the particular shape around or on these icons, how useful is traditional social media for education? And so choose a color and draw the shape that responds to that. And any online students, just please list your choices in your notes. Do you see your shape tool here that you can use as well? There you go. Ah, I see somebody did. Okay. Does anybody want to share their thoughts on social media and how useful it could be for education? You can raise your hand. Okay, Sarah?
So I use a blog in my classes quite a lot for students to do instead of like journal responses. So they run a blog. I've also done class wikis where they've done collaborative activities to build like crowdsource knowledge about something or build a class guide to something. So that's been fairly useful.
Yeah, I can imagine. So websites have been really useful for a long time, and many classrooms that I know of build a wiki or a little blog for their students to work together on and to share information. So that's really useful. Okay, so what is online learning? Online learning itself is just simply communicating via a networked computer, but it is specifically for the purpose of learning. It includes collaborative work and engagement even when you're not in the same place or the same location, the same time. So that's you're using the computers to really access information and work together. It includes collaborative work and the engagement even when you're not there together. So the first time that people really started using this technology together was with what I think is pronounced MOOCs, massive open online courses. And the very first one was actually offered in 2006, even though the term was not was not coined until 2009. So the very first one was offered in 2006 by a group called Hashtag. It was the informative year, IN/formative year, and it was 1 year of free public access classes that was offered in collaboration between 20 universities. So there were gigantic enrollment numbers in this thing, and that's been an ongoing project for these universities, and they're still actually doing this today to improve the use of these massive open online courses. Can anybody guess or give us an answer on what they think some of the issues with such a large course might be?
Connection.
Sorry?
Connectivity issues.
Connectivity issues. Yeah, that's appropriate. Feedback. Yeah, definitely. That's right. They, anything else? They, too large of a class, yeah. And what's the difficulty with that, Brenda?
One-on-one feedback, so people don't get any individualized attention, can't ask questions and get quick responses.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. They also tend to still be really one directional. So that's just a kind of an, yeah, exactly, Sarah. It's still basically a one-way conversation from the, the professor is just giving the information to the students and they're just supposed to deal with it. It relies on a lot of autonomy from the student themselves to take the initiative to do the work, to continue the learning on their own, to find the information that they need, and to, just to make progress. So what can you imagine might happen because of this? You want to put it in the chat box and tell me what you think might be an issue? Lots of dropouts. That's right. Exactly. So they're thinking that there's, yeah, lots of frustration. There's a lot of dropouts from those kinds of classes. They think that there's only maybe a 10 or 20% completion rate on a lot of these. So that's a real issue. So a blended classroom is when you may be in a face-to-face classroom, but you're also bringing in online tools. You're using those for connecting, for sharing information, for searching for information and sharing it within the classroom, or maybe doing some learning on the outside, outside of the classroom time. And also extending the classroom experience by allowing students to collaborate together, to hold discussions and collaborate on projects, again, outside of the classroom time, and not even having to necessarily be on their computers at the same time. So for instance, in a discussion group, you can post your own information or your own post there, and then someone can then respond to that at their own time. So there's no need to be in the same place at the same time. Let's see. So blended classrooms are useful for small or large classes. In small classes, you can reduce lectures and increase the discussions and collaborative activities on the outside of time, the classroom time together. Or with large classrooms, large groups, you can have online discussions and interactions and more computer-based assignments, so that it allows for that connectivity that is so needed for learning. So there's pros and cons to using technology. So it can enhance or detract from your educational experience. So again, here, let me have you choose a color and use the typing tool from the tools at the top up here, and just type in a positive or negative aspect that you can think of using technology in education. And asynchronous students, please just pause the video and write down your thoughts in your notes. Can you guys add something there? Oh, yeah, very good. Frees up time and space. Yeah, that's right. Time to reflect before responding. That's true, yeah. Any bad things about using technology in the classroom? Can use educational videos. Oh, yes, possibly distracting. Distractions, that's right. So can somebody tell me what they think about, how can it be distracting?
Well, I know that there's been times that I've been teaching class where students will just pull out their cell phone and start like texting people or looking at Facebook while I'm trying to talk. So it can be a problem. And then they come up afterwards and they're like, well, I missed something. Well, you missed it because you weren't paying attention. But
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's very true. It is very distracting, and I know I've been guilty of that in class as well, where I might have my phone or I might be looking up even some information from the class, but I'm not focusing on what the instructor is talking about. Online classrooms are a better back row. You want to explain that one? I like that. description, by the way.
Sure, it's like, you know, if you teach live, there are always those students in that back row, right? They're hanging out there, they're distracted, they don't want to be taking part, they don't really want to be in the room, so they kind of hide there. So they take online classes thinking that it's going to be, you know, an even better way of dodging attention and not having to take part and goof off and still get the credit.
Absolutely, that's very true. I have noticed that it is a con for technology for instructors is that it takes a lot of time, and they seem to a lot of times want to just simply put their class information that they use face-to-face online and then let it run itself. So they don't really take the time to interact with their students, and that to me is a real con from the student's point of view, and I think also from the instructor's point of view, because they also are not getting feedback on their own teaching and how effective they are being. So, some cautions on using technology. We've talked about some of those things. It can add to your educational experience, but you really have to think carefully about what you're doing. Social media is great for, you know, discussing and putting out information and sharing links, but sometimes it's really difficult to keep control over the conversation and keep people focused so that whatever your mission and purpose for your class may go by the wayside. You may actually not achieve the purpose of your class if you're using a social media app that is way too broad and doesn't have enough controls to it. Can anybody else think of some issues with using the technology besides what we've already discussed?
Yeah, I mean, not everything that's out there is actually true information. And so I find that sometimes my students might be, you know, trying to go home and do research on their own and look stuff up that we talked about, and then they come back in with some incorrect information or something like that, and I'll have to re-guide them on, well, that's not exactly right. This is really the way it is.
That's very true. So there needs to be a little education on you know, if you're going to go search out there online, then where is a good place to look, and maybe where's a place that you should stay away from that's not going to have such accurate information, and how do you figure that out for yourself as well? Sarah, you had a comment?
Yeah, I sometimes wonder about us as designers of the classes or institutions, people setting these all up, that we don't always take that digital divide into account too much, and that not all our students necessarily have access to good bandwidth or good cellular power or whatever it might be, and that sometimes we're inadvertently leaving out some students who don't have as much technological access as we kind of assume that everybody does these days.
Yeah, that's very true. And you know, a different aspect of the digital divide is also digital just competence in the digital world. And surprisingly, sometimes it is the younger people who have grown up with tech all around them who don't have the skills to use it, where you would really think that they would. So that's another thing to think about while you're using technology with your students, to make sure that you teach them exactly how to use these tools that you're providing to them. So in summary, you can use technology in your classrooms, and it can really be beneficial and add to the educational experience, but you really have to choose it very carefully. And it can enhance your face-to-face experience with your students and extend how they learn, extend the resources that you have to bring information to their attention and to collaborate with them in learning. And it can allow fully online learners to also interact, debate, and collaborate for the meaningful learning that they're looking for, that will keep them engaged and allow them to be successful in completing their learning. So do you have any questions or comments, everybody?
Nope, I think I'm okay.
Okay, you can always email me at marsh.39@wright.edu if you have any questions. And asynchronous students, please upload your notes and comments in Pilot under this week's BB Collaborate session entry. Thank you very much for your time. And here are my resources if you're interested.